You've likely heard the term hot tub shock if you've owned a hot tub for any length of time, but that doesn't mean zzz, you get shocked when you touch the water. But what does it mean? That's what we're getting into today in this video. We're going to talk about exactly why you need to shock your hot tub, how to shock your hot tub, how often to shock your hot tub, and how hot tub shock differs from sanitizer. And we're going to get into whether or not oxidizer is another word for shock or something different. There's a lot of terms in the hot tub world, and my goal with this channel is to simplify everything for you to get you soaking in your water faster. Hi, my name is Jeff Campbell from Hot Tub Owner HQ, and I'm glad you're here with me. So I do indeed use hot tub shock. Here's the one that I use. It's from Spa Guard, but there's lots of different hot tub shocks out there. I'm not telling you that this is the only one that works or anything like that. It's just the one that I like. But I do indeed use a chlorine-based shock in my hot tub. In a minute, I'm going to get into how often to add that and how much of that to add. But what does hot tub shock actually do? After all, we're also adding sanitizer on a regular basis too, right? So why do we even need to add shock? First of all, just know that shock doesn't actually kill bacteria. That's the job of the sanitizer. What hot tub shock does do, though, is it uses oxygen to combine with organic matter that is in the water, and it kind of combines that into a thing, and it allows it to be safely removed and then eventually trapped in your filter system. It also allows your sanitizer to work a lot more efficiently. The job of the sanitizer is to kill bacteria. That's its primary goal. And if you're not adding shock, then the water is eventually going to get really kind of gummed up with that organic matter. The sanitizer is going to have to work really hard. You'll probably find that you're going to have to add more and more larger quantities of sanitizer to kind of keep up with the demand. But there's also another key thing that shock does to the water in your hot tub that is absolutely crucial to get accurate test readings on your test strips. And that is something called removing chloramines or bromamines. I know those are big words. You get bromamines if you use bromine as your primary sanitizer in the water. You get chloramines if you use chlorine as the primary sanitizer in your water. So you're never going to have both of those things at the same time. But depending upon which of those two sanitizers you use, you will get that as a natural byproduct of using that sanitizer. The downside is basically that's used up sanitizer is what that effectively is. And it can give a false reading on your test strip. When you dip a test strip in, it can show levels of bromine or chlorine that aren't really there. You're not really getting the protection from the bacteria in the water that you think you are. So hot tub shock actually revitalizes the sanitizer and removes and kills the chloramines or the bromamines, again, depending upon which type of sanitizer you're using. That is one of the big benefits of using a hot tub shock, is to get rid of those so you're not getting false readings on your test strips, because you don't want to get in water that you think is safe that's really not safe. Real quick before we keep going, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit that like button. It sends a great signal to YouTube, and then they're going to show my videos to more hot tub owners just like you, and it helps me grow my channel and help more people, and I really appreciate your taking the time to do that. So I've already kind of alluded to it, but what are the different kinds of shock that are available? Well, there's really just two categories of shock. There is chlorine-based shock and non-chlorine-based shock. They both have their pluses and their minuses. I do indeed use a chlorine-based shock, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second. But let's start by talking about the non-chlorine-based shocks. First of all, just know that non-chlorine shock won't disinfect the water. Chlorine-based shock will disinfect the water. Also, non-chlorine shock is going to tend to have cloudier water than if you use a chlorine-based shock. It's just that way. I've tried it, and I always get clearer, cleaner looking water with the chlorine-based shock. That doesn't necessarily mean cleaner from a bacteria level standpoint. It's just not going to be as cloudy if you use a chlorine-based shock versus a non-chlorine-based shock. However, the non-chlorine shock will be gentler on your skin. Some people have a strong reaction to chlorine on their skin. It can leave the skin kind of red and almost look like an allergic reaction in some cases. Often, but not always, but often that is when somebody isn't careful about the levels in their water and they get in when the levels are really too high. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too, how long you should wait after you shock your hot tub. Chlorine-based shock will do a better job of disinfecting the water, but it will raise the chlorine levels as you might expect, whereas non-chlorine shock won't actually affect the chlorine levels in your hot tub. So whether you're using bromine or chlorine as your sanitizer, if you add add chlorine shock and the levels raise up above a safe level, you will have to wait until those levels go back down again before you should soak. It's not safe to soak in high chlorine. How long you have to wait depends upon how much of this you add, and we're going to cover that in a minute, as well as what the levels are reading on your test strip. And in some cases, you might have to wait 24 hours or more before the levels come back down to a safe level, but you absolutely want to do that. The other downside of chlorine-based shock, which is also true of chlorine-based sanitizer, it's not really designed to hold up well in hot water. That's why chlorine gets used a lot in swimming pools, whereas bromine as a sanitizer gets used a lot in hot tubs. How long does it take for hot tub shock to actually quote-unquote work? And the short answer is, once you add it to your hot tub, it's only going to take about 15 minutes before it really kicks in and starts to do its job. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that you want to get back into your hot tub within 15 minutes. Ideally, you want to leave the cover off, turn all the jets and water features on. That way the shock gets really well circulated throughout the entire hot tub system and the plumbing. And then leave that cover off and then restart the jets as needed and have it go for about 45 minutes would be my ideal scenario. Then you always want to test the water with a test strip and make sure that the levels are good before you consider getting back in. Never get in a hot tub where you haven't checked the levels recently. That's just asking for trouble. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you do find that the levels are exceedingly high, you're just going to have to play a waiting game and wait for those levels to drop, and that could be as much as 24 hours. So how often should you shock your hot tub? And the answer to that is generally about once every 7 days. So once a week, usually just find a set day. Maybe that's Monday, maybe that's Saturday. Find a set day and just stick to that and add a little bit of hot tub shock every week on average, without exception. You don't want to skip this, but there is a caveat here. If you've had a party and you had a bunch of people over and everybody was in the hot tub and you're talking about people with like colognes and perfumes and body lotions and things like that, I always like to shock my hot tub after a night of extra heavy use. And it just helps to kind of revitalize the water and deal with all that extra stuff that is now in the water that's not normally there during a normal week. So once a week, unless you've had a big party where there's a bunch of people in the hot tub, then go ahead and shock it the next morning as well. But how much hot tub shock do you add? Well, let me do that for you right now because it is indeed time for me to shock my hot tub. So I like to use the lid, and I'm just going to pour into here. And as you can see there, that's about how much I'm going to add. I can always add more. If I overdo it though, I can't add less. So always start small, run the jets for 20, 30, 45 minutes, test it, see how the levels look. And if it seems like they're on the low side, you can add a little bit more, although you also want to check your sanitizer. In my case, I have a floater with bromine tablets. So I do want to check and make sure that there's still tablets inside of there because they obviously do dissolve over a period of time. But I'm just going to toss this in. And normally I would just hit the jets and the water features right now. I always cut the power when I shoot my videos though. That way it doesn't kick on and make a bunch of noise while I'm trying to record. But I am going to do that right now just to kind of get the water going and get that chemical dissipated throughout every spot in my hot tub, jets, plumbing, filters, everything like that. So let's do that right now. Now, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but when I added this shock, it did turn the water a little bit green. And that's because of the iron and mineral content in the water reacting with the chlorine in here. And it will dissipate. That color will go away. It won't stay that greenish color for very long. But don't be alarmed if you see that. It just means you've got high mineral content in your water. If the levels are really high, you can get test strips to check for metals levels in your water. Say that 3 times fast. You can check for that, and you can get chemicals to add to your water that reduce or remove the mineral and metal content from your water. I don't necessarily feel a need to do that unless my levels were astronomically high, which they're not. But I didn't want you to be alarmed about that green color. The last thing I want to tell you is that when you do a water change, which you should be doing about every 3 months or so, when you do a water change, a lot of people think, well, do I need to add shock right now? Because the water, brand new water out of the hose, it doesn't have chlorine in there. And the short answer is no. You don't need to shock the water right after you've refilled it. Do add sanitizer and do obviously balance your alkalinity and your pH, but you don't need to shock it until about a week after you've done that refill. And the reason is the water is brand new. It's not contaminated yet. It doesn't have any bacteria or organic compounds or anything like that in there yet. So the sanitizer hasn't done anything yet. Therefore, there's nothing for the shock to do, and it would be a total waste of money to add some right then and there. So add shock about a week after you've done your water change, and then every week there on out. Anyway, I hope this video helps you, and I will see you in the next one.